everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Closer Look, the show dedicated to bringing you the facts. We ask the questions no one else will, and we get the answers that no one else can. I'm Aravina Akia. Thanks so much for joining us. On the radar this week, we're talking all things related to digital assets, crypto, Bitcoin, DeFi, NFTs, and the whole nine. Why? Because the opening of the FDX Digital Crypto Bahamas Conference officially heralded the start of the crypto craze here in the Bahamas. Now, if you're anything like me, then conversations about NFTs, crypto, and blockchain may sound like gibberish. So let's start at the beginning. Your textbook definition of cryptocurrency is a digital currency in which transactions are verified and records maintained by a decentralized system using cryptography rather than a centralized authority. Now, this is not to be confused with digital currencies like the sand dollar, for example, which is in essence e-cash that doesn't require any special indigenous methods to encrypt them. We'll have more about the sand dollar in another show. Now, no matter how you slice the pie, these types of digital assets are the wave of the future, which means that all of us should definitely be paying close attention to exactly what's happening abroad and here at home. Just last week, the government released a policy paper on the future of digital assets, which for all intents and purposes is meant to be a sort of blueprint for exactly how the country will proceed. The document, which was tabled by the Prime Minister, seems pretty comprehensive, and it covers all of the things that you'd expect it to, like how we can take advantage of the crypto space while maintaining our reputation and good standing as a financial jurisdiction, or how the appropriate skills and training will be facilitated to ensure that Bahamians can actually position themselves to take advantage of the opportunities that may arise. Coincidentally, the policy paper was released just days ahead of the highly anticipated Crypto Bahamas event hosted by FDX Digital. Looks like good proactive planning, if you ask me. Now, unless you've been living under a rock or in a cave in Maguana, then you've probably heard about the event, which took place last week here in the capital. It was a super exclusive, invite-only event that provided collaborative and network opportunities for players in both the crypto and traditional finance industry. Didn't get invited? Don't feel bad. Neither did I. But you know who was invited? Our Prime Minister. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
The Bahamas is not only open and ready for business, but moving to the forefront of this most exciting era of digital asset innovation. For generations, our people have developed a unique expertise as leading professionals in international finance services. As a result, the Bahamas has an extensive capacity of human capital positioned to assist all in the fintech space who look to do business here. In our policy white paper, you'll also note the commitment of my government to provide the highest in tertiary education to Bahamians who want to be in the fintech and cryptocurrency space. The Bahamas and Bahamians all across our archipelago are ready and willing to partner with you to do business in our great country.
Well, there you have it. According to the Prime Minister, this means preparing the country to become a hub for scores of major digital asset management firms. In its policy paper, the government notes what it describes as a virtual circle of promise, which has attracted potential prospects looking to operate in this space. And if the list of speakers at the conference was any indication of the interest, then big things could be on the horizon. I mean, we're talking major names like Neil Chopra of Fireblocks, Grace Isford of Lux Capital, Tegan Klein of Edge and Node, and major political players like former U.S. President Bill Clinton and former U.K. Prime Minister Tony Blair. There was even NFL and NBA royalty on the docket. But let's be honest, big names don't necessarily mean big results. What will yield results, however, is strong legislation, a competent, educated, and well-trained populace, and a little political will. And I'm not going to lie, folks, it looks like we're headed in the right direction. Later on in the show, we'll be talking to Attorney General Ryan Pinder, who will give us some insights on the government's plans moving forward. Stay with us. We have more show right after this break.
I'm Dr. Nakia Forbes. COVID is a very unpredictable virus, and sometimes even young and healthy people get very, very sick. I've treated these cases, and it's heartbreaking. While vaccines might not always stop the infection, they're excellent at preventing severe disease. You have questions, and doctors and nurses are now available at vaccination centers to give you answers. Help protect yourself from this unpredictable virus and make your appointment now.
Welcome back. I'm Arabina Apia, and tonight we're talking all things crypto, and integral to the regulation of that industry is the Executive Director of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, Christina Roll. Now, our independent correspondent, Marcos Ambrista, was able to sit down with the Executive Director, but before we jump into that segment, we do have Marcos joining us at the desk once again. Welcome. How are you doing tonight?
It's always good to be with Arabina.
Oh, just flatter me, why don't you? So, give us an idea of what can we expect? Like, what did you learn from talking to the Executive Director?
One thing I can say is that she holds a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to the digital assets of the Bahamas. And speaking of which, that's actually one of the things that I learned, that there's a difference between digital assets and digital currencies, which crypto happens to be a part of. Firstly, the words can be used interchangeably. We can use virtual assets, digital assets, crypto assets. But in our interview with her, you're going to see that there's so much difference and similarities all at the same time.
Fascinating. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
Let's do it. With the recent developments of digital assets in country, I sat down with Executive Director of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, Christina Roll, to take a closer look.
The Securities Commission is a statutory body, and we're responsible for the administration of 4 pieces of legislation, namely the Securities Industry Act, the Investment Funds Act, the Financial and Corporate Service Providers Act, as well as the Digital Assets and Registered Exchanges Act. When I say the administration of those acts, that means that on a day-to-day basis, the Commission is responsible for all matters relative to the supervision, investigation, and enforcement of entities that fall within those pieces of legislation.
Although the Bahamas has always been a leader in financial services, I was curious to know, why us?
The legislative framework is one element. The second element is we do have financial institutions who are on the ground and who are willing to do business with persons in the digital asset space. We have a lot of professionals on the ground who are able to take on roles within companies who may be looking to relocate to the Bahamas. And then fourth, I think it's just a great place to live.
Of all the challenges that may exist for the Bahamas with this new industry, education seems to trump them all.
We have education that is needed for the public to address myths and to address just a lot of misinformation that may be out there with digital assets. Then we have education for people who want either to be employees or owners in the space, and those are different levels of education. For persons who want to enter the space as employees. I think one of the big advantages that the Bahamas have over other jurisdictions is while we don't have specific expertise in digital assets, we have a lot of experts with broad financial services knowledge, and I think that is one of the things that really gave us the edge. Now we have to take those persons with those broad financial services knowledge and give them specific digital assets knowledge.
And while this major move will undoubtedly bring jobs, Roll believes that there are opportunities for Bahamians to become owners as well.
If we're then going to transition from employees to owners, then we really need to develop coders in this space. So we need Bahamians who are prepared to learn how to code in general and then code for blockchain. That's how you become owners in this space.
Reporting for a closer look, I'm Marcos Ambrister.
So, Marcos, we've heard from the Executive Director. Tell me, what are some of the other interesting takeaways that you think you can shed light on?
I think one of the most interesting for me was the fact that she labeled a lot of the challenges that we face right now, one of them being education. Of course, there are a lot of myths that are going on right now, definitely knowing the difference between e-currencies and digital assets. And another thing that she spoke about was us now becoming employers in this industry and not just the employees. She spoke about the fact that one of the advantages that we have as well is the fact that we are well educated, not just with digital assets itself, but at the broad spectrum of financial services. We have so many talented people here that won't necessarily require us having to bring in talents, but we can actually source that here in the Bahamas locally.
Awesome. So in your opinion, what sort of things will we need to really take our digital assets conversation to the next level?
One of the greatest things that she pointed out was the need for coders. We need people that are able to code, people that are able to code blockchains and be able to carry this industry to the next level. That is really what's going to determine how far we're able to go as a hub.
Excellent. Be sure to catch Marco's extended interview with the executive director on our social media pages this week. Thank you, Marcos.
No problem.
When we come back from the commercial break, we sit down with the Attorney General, Ryan Pinder. Stay with us. More of a closer look after this.
Health is your complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not just the absence of disease. It is an important part of our human rights and ability to live dignified lives. This right to care goes beyond experiences in a doctor's office or at a pharmacist's window. Health includes the right to access safe water and sanitation to keep our hands clean and avoid spreading diseases. Adequate nutrition to keep our bodies strong and healthy. Adequate housing to shelter us from the intense changes in our climate. Secure working and environmental conditions to protect us from work-related accidents, and access to accurate information and education for better health decision-making. These are rights and not privileges to protect and promote optimum human health at every stage of life. This message is brought to you by the PAHO WHO, Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Healthy Bahamas Coalition.
Welcome back. Joining me now in studio is Attorney General Ryan Pinder. Hi, Mr. Pinder. How are you?
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
So in doing my research, I found out that in terms of talking to people about digital assets, you seem to be the man to talk to. Why is that?
Well, you know, I was tasked by the Prime Minister early on to start putting a framework for the digital white paper, or the policy white paper for the government. You know, it's an area that I had worked on in the past when the DARE Act and the legislation first came about. From an industry point of view, I was in the private sector then, and I was working very hard with the Securities Commission in putting that framework together and putting that draft together in order to be able to really make the Bahamas an attractive jurisdiction for the new frontier of fintech, what we call it, financial technology, and really expanding the areas of financial services in the country. You know, as the prior financial services minister, I was working very hard at the time to find new products and new avenues for the country, because as we know, financial services has been, some may say, under assault, but certainly under a lot of pressure from international organizations, and we've seen some clients leave and some institutions leave the country just because of the shifting landscape. Right. And when you see something like that, and you see other opportunities within the space, you know, we are a well-established financial center. We have a lot of very talented Bahamians in the financial services industry. And it was thought that, you know, we really should explore positioning the country to take advantage of the new evolving cryptocurrency, digital asset space, and related fintech space, and try to position us from both from a legislative and regulatory point of view, but also from a policy point of view. And so after coming to office in September, the Prime Minister wanted to continue that theme. Certainly, FTX had just come to the Bahamas, which was a major institution in the space that has decided to headquarter in the Bahamas, which is a major step for the jurisdiction. And to build on that momentum, we wanted to develop a proper framework and a way forward. And so we developed the policy white paper that has been released last week, for one, to set the tone, to signal to the international community that the Bahamas was serious, that we were taking a comprehensive approach. We understood the industry as a jurisdiction. and we understood that regulation was good in this area, and that the good players would want to see that, and we are a jurisdiction that would invite good players and good participants in the industry, and so we put that together. I had a significant role in drafting it and working with the Office of the Prime Minister to get it released, and so I have some background knowledge. I've represented clients in the space. And like I said, I helped with the legislation.
So all of that considered, this was a really exciting week last week for you then, because the FDX conference opened. Tell us a little bit about the experience that you had there. I understand that there were a lot of big names from both the crypto and the traditional finance space. So tell us about what that experience was like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's what was really encouraging, because historically the Bahamas has been a rather significant player and jurisdiction in the traditional finance space. We've always known financial services to be a significant component. And to see us bring our experience to the table at an event to such a high profile as we saw at the FTX conference today, and to be a participant as the industry moves ahead, that was very exciting. And it was very exciting to see a lot of Bahamian professionals there learning and creating relationships and seeing how they can take advantage of this growing area. Certainly the Prime Minister opened the conference this morning with a very impassioned speech, letting all the audience, and it was a standing room only crowd in the conference room, know that the Bahamas, one, is a serious place, but we are an inviting place. We want the business to be here, and they have the full support of the government behind them. And then we had a few other opportunities as a government to showcase our commitment to the digital asset space. Minister Michael Halkitis spoke today. I spoke on a panel with the Deputy Prime Minister. And so, we were very, I think, constructive in how we were explaining the Bahamas' place in the digital asset space. And of note, this was a rather exclusive event. Well done and put on very, very professionally, and you could hear, and many people said the audience that was invited and that attended are really the senior persons in the industry worldwide, which is a great opportunity to showcase the Bahamas to them.
So let's talk about that, because you have all of these senior people. You have persons who are familiar with fintech, who are familiar with the traditional financial services sector, but digital currencies, cryptocurrency is a little bit of a new frontier for the average Bahamian. So let's talk about that. What is digital currency exactly?
So you have digital currency, which is almost a digital version of money. You have digital assets, which is a little bit different of a definition, and that ties to different types of assets that may have value and to trade those, but may not be kind of the equivalent of currency. So we would have in the Bahamas, and I'm sure Bahamians would have heard about it, maybe not quite understood it, the sand dollar, which is a central bank-backed digital currency. And it's one of the first in the world that was backed by a central bank. And the vision of the sand dollar is, and especially relevant to our family island communities that may not have access to proper banking facilities, which unfortunately is the case in many of our islands, to have a form of payment that was digital and electronic that they might be able to do from their phone or their computer and be able to engage in commerce. Now, having seen that and the successful launch of that digital currency, the sand dollar, the Bahamas government, and it's in the policy paper, thought it important to help familiarize Bahamians to the concept, to help provide opportunities for them to participate in the digital asset space as consumers in the first instance, but to continue that through the evolution of participating in a growing industry. And a few things that the government has chosen to do in its policy white paper to help allow that is one, we want to encourage Bahamians to be able to pay their taxes and other government fees, possibly their NIB contributions in sand dollar, which would help Bahamians understand how the digital currency works. It is the equivalent of a B dollar because it's central bank backed, which is an important thing. And then eventually we would like to get to the point where Bahamians can use B dollars and the sand dollar to invest globally in digital assets once they have that familiarity and understand the process. We are also launching a comprehensive education framework to help Bahamians who want to get involved in the industry to learn about it. The Securities Commission and the government and University of Bahamas are working to have a degree program. So somebody can go and get a graduate degree or a bachelor's degree in digital assets. That's what we're working towards. So Bahamians could be adequately trained at a very young age to be a participant in the industry. One thing that really hit home to me today, to your point, in Bahamians getting involved in the industry, I met a new licensee that just licensed another digital asset exchange, just licensed in the Bahamas. And the managing director is a Bahamian, and the compliance officer is a Bahamian. And in fact, the compliance officer they hired worked for me when I was the Minister of Financial Services in the civil service. And I helped her at the time get her qualification as a compliance officer. Now she's head compliance officer for a digital asset exchange licensed in the Bahamas. So Bahamians are getting involved, they're getting indoctrinated, they're learning the industry, and they're gaining rather meaningful employment in the industry. So I think the Bahamian participation in digital assets is twofold. One, it's on the consumer level, bringing familiarity and exposure to Bahamians to be able to participate. And on the other level is to have our Bahamian professionals actually be in the industry, earning a living, developing companies, and developing, in fact, their own companies. An interesting point as well, one of my good friends, an esteemed professional, his name's Brian Jones, he just licensed the first digital wallet owned by a Bahamian ever, and it's licensed and operating. So you say, well, Ryan, what's a digital wallet? Right? Well, imagine you have your hard wallet where you keep your money. Well, the digital wallet is your wallet that keeps your digital assets in it. So if you're trading or you're spending it, that is your digital wallet, and that is how it's held, rather than maybe in a traditional bank account, for example. So Bahamians are exploring different avenues in the industry and participating and gaining the knowledge and exposure. And I think that's certainly something that the Bahamian government fully endorses. We detail it in the policy paper. We're firmly committed to having Bahamians be meaningful participants, both as consumers and in the industry.
So you mentioned the policy paper, which I have here, and I know the Bahamas is one of the first countries to sort of have this sort of comprehensive regulations, comprehensive legislation. How important is that, especially for an industry like fintech, an industry like cryptocurrency? Why is it so important that we have this level of regulation?
Sure. When people look at the industry, the digital asset, the cryptocurrency industry, certainly it's a fast evolving industry. Every day it seems to be something new, a new product, a new regulation, or something that affects the industry. But also, the industry grew faster than countries could react to create a framework for it. And what the industry learned was, yes, we're growing and we're being successful, but nobody is really respecting us from a financial point of view. So it's hard to open bank accounts. It's hard to get the respect of other jurisdictions when you're unregulated and you're just doing it on your own. And so these highly successful and even lesser successful entities look to have a regulatory framework where they could say, no, I'm licensed by a respected regulator. I have to report, I have to have audits, I have to do what other financial firms have to do. So I have that regulatory framework. But regulation isn't just enough to attract them. You have to have a jurisdiction, one that is attractive to do business in, that's fairly easy to do business in, and that the businesses have the confidence that the government and the regulator will adjust the regime to reflect how the industry adjusts. It's a very fast-moving and developing industry, and I think that the Bahamas ticks all those boxes to attract that new business. And we certainly think that with the exposure at the FDX conference today, that there are a number of businesses that may look forward to doing business here.
So in terms of the linkages then, because you talked about the regulations and what already exists. So what about the linkages between what already exists in terms of our financial services legislation and future legislation, future regulations for this quickly evolving, this very fast-paced environment?
Well, we already have amendments to the DARE Act, which is the Digital Asset and Regulated Exchange Act. That's the operable piece of legislation.
Right.
And we're already working on legislative amendments to, just a year and a half after it's really been enforced, to advance it to keep up with what the industry is doing.
So what would some of those amendments look like?
So for example, when we first put the legislation in place, it really was focused on regulating primarily two different areas.
Okay.
The first one would be businesses that are operating in the space. We call it virtual asset service providers, but operating in that space. And the second one was, at the time we launched the legislation, some may remember all of these different coins. They call them, coin offerings and tokens and all of these different offerings, public offerings of coins and
Right.
initial coin offerings. And so we wanted to create a regime that could regulate an offering of a coin. As that developed and as the industry developed, new products within the digital asset space evolved. So now we have what's called a non-fungible token, an NFT. And that's a fairly new development in the space. And what that means, it's actually something tied to something finite. So for example, at an event the other night, Antonius Roberts created 3 pieces of art of which he's going to tokenize as an NFT. So it becomes now a digital piece of art. Think of it that way.
Okay.
And it may be one token tied to each piece of art. So when I buy that token, I now have the ownership of that digital piece of art.
Nice. Okay.
When I sell that token to somebody else, to you, you're now the owner of that digital piece of art, and I'm no longer the owner of that digital piece of art. So everything, so think of an NFT as taking something that is finite and making it digital. And that's a tremendous opportunity. I applaud Antonius Roberts. The proceeds from his NFT artwork will go back into helping Bahamian artisans through his academy, and so that's always a nice factor as well. And so, these tokens, these NFTs are very, very popular now, and our legislation doesn't quite cover the framework for that. So we're making amendments to ensure that we can have a regulated regime around NFTs, for example.
Thank you so much, Attorney General, for being here. This was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So as you can imagine, we have so many questions, and we can't all get to them in this one short show. So stay tuned, because we have an extended interview with the minister on our social media. Stay tuned.
What's the Bahamas doing in the fight against COVID?
We're empowering Bahamians with free testing, free masks, and access to doctors for answers to your questions. Vaccines and boosters are saving lives. We have tighter restrictions at our borders, and we're expanding hospital capacity and hiring more nurses and doctors. We're taking on COVID while reopening schools and keeping our economy moving.
Together, we're moving forward.
This new world of digital assets and cryptocurrency is here to stay, and the space is filled with opportunities that are waiting for someone like you to take advantage of them. As you've heard tonight, the government has not only acknowledged that new reality, but is already taking the necessary steps to make those opportunities open and available for everyone. Thank you to Christina Roll, the Executive Director of the Securities Commission, and Attorney General Ryan Pinder for being here tonight and walking us through those processes. And thank you to our independent correspondent, Marcos Ambrister, as well. From your comments and calls, we know that you guys have loved our Millennial in Government segment, so don't worry, we have not forgotten about it. This week's Millennial in Government is David Strawn, who is the project manager at the Digital Transformation Unit. Stay tuned for his segment, which will air immediately following the show. We'll be back next week for a closer look at more of the stories that you care about. I'm Arabina Apia. Good night, everyone.